Hello everybody, this is Adam from Wise Pet Gods. I hope you're doing well. Once upon a time, I fancied myself as something of a baseball card dealer in the late 80s and early 90s, and so I accumulated a lot of different cards of different sets and so forth, and I had baseball card supplies that I bought from time to time. So recently I was going through some of my old boxes and came across this box from Cardboard Gold, and I think these were probably top loaders that I had bought. But when I opened the box, I found that it was full of Donruss Action All-Stars, so these large cards that they issued in the 80s. If we want to look at more later, we can. Just let me know what you think as we go through this, and we'll go from there. Alright, so this particular stack that I have here looks like it came from 1984. And so this is the Donruss Champion set with Dale Murphy. This is the set that kind of compared a current player of the time, in this case Dale Murphy, to a classic player, retired player, maybe a Hall of Fame. I think they were Hall of Fame players. So this is Frank Robinson that they compared Dale Murphy to. So a couple of MVPs there. Nice big cards. In the same year, Donruss issued their regular Action All-Star cards for the second year in a row. And this was the year that Donruss kind of came out with that clean, classic 84 design. It carried that over fairly well to their Action All-Stars, where they have just the maroon border and then a big player picture with the name and position and the Donruss logo. So here's Hal McRae. And the backs featured large color images, so that was pretty unusual for the time. Big stuff, and he was Harold McRae here. We all knew him as Hal, I think. Okay. Same treatment for Keith Hernandez, because he's Keith Hernandez. Ken Griffey Sr., a few years before Junior came on the scene, the major league scene anyway. George Griffey. Interesting how Donruss chose to use their given names rather than their maybe preferred names. Dave Stieb, underrated pitcher from the 80s. David, as you would expect. Pedro Guerrero, slugger for the Dodgers. Gary Redus, who was a power and speed threat for the Cincinnati Reds in the mid-80s. He kind of had his heyday with the club when they were at their low points before Dave Parker and Pete Rose came to town, before Eric Davis took off. Andre Thornton, a slugger in the AL in the 70s and 80s. Fernando Valenzuela, just a couple years removed from Fernando Mania. Buddy Bell, whose son now will be the manager of the Reds. David Bell, that's the son's name. New Hall of Famer, Harold Baines, who was listed at outfield here, maybe actually played outfield in those years, but spent a large part of his career as a designated hitter. Bob Horner, monster slugger for the Atlanta Braves, who went to Japan for a while. Had success there. Terry Kennedy was an all-star catcher for the Padres, also played for the Cardinals and I think a couple other teams. John Castino was one of the young players that the Twins were trying to bring along in the early to mid-80s. Played second base. Doug DeSenz, is it DeSenz or DeSensei? I'm never quite sure about that one. He was a really good first baseman, infielder for the Orioles and Angels in the 70s and early 80s. Sweet Lou Whitaker, who needs to be in the Hall of Fame now that both Alan Trammell and especially Jack Morris are there. Teammates on that 84 Tigers team that won the World Series. Tony Pena, another all-star catcher. Willie McGee, fresh off the 1983 NL MVP season. Gary LaBelle, who was a relief pitcher for the Giants for a lot of years. More Fernandos, looks like I stocked up on those a little bit. Jim Rice, who had great peak value, kind of petered out early but still made it to the Hall of Fame. James Rice, a slugger for the Boston Red Sox. More Andre Thornton, cornered the market on those again. Lou Whitaker. Dan Quisenberry, who was probably my favorite relief pitcher of the 1980s, consistently won the Rolaids Relief Award in the AL, in the American League. Never quite got his due, I didn't think, amongst the greats like Lee Smith and Bruce Sutter, and passed away way too early as well. It's more Jim Rice. Ron Guidry, who had a couple of really monster seasons for the Yankees in 78 and 85, I think, was his other really big one. Although you can see he had 21 complete games even in 83, so that's something we don't see much, maybe won't see again. Jim Clancy, solid star level starter for the Blue Jays in the 80s. Steve Rogers, again another underrated pitcher for a Canadian team, played for the Montreal Expos. Dusty Baker, part of those really good Dodgers teams from the 70s and into the 80s. Johnny Baker, interesting. And so now, of course, he has recently been a manager. He's not at the moment. Ron Oster, second baseman for my Cincinnati Reds and one of my favorite players. Bert Behome Blyleven, played for a long time. Eventually accumulated enough counting stats to match up with his value stats and made it to the Hall of Fame. Larry Parrish, outfielder for the Rangers. Greg Luzinski, big slugging designated hitter for the White Sox. Sorry, I was looking at Carney Lansford, who played for the A's before that, for the Angels and the Red Sox. Really good average hitter with a little power too. Steve Garvey, Popeye forearms. Mr. Clean, who turned out not to be so Mr. Clean in his personal life, but lots of people still think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I don't quite think he measures up, but still a famous player to be sure. Kent Herbeck, who needed to buy a vowel, a slugging first baseman for the Twins in the 80s. Paul Molitor, who was injured all the time early in his career and became quite durable as a designated hitter late in his career, made it to the Hall. And then another of those 84 Tigers, Lance Parrish, the catcher. So there you have it. Walk through some of my Donruss Action All-Stars and Donruss Champions. Let me know if you're interested in seeing more of these. And in the meantime, you can find us at waxpackguides.com or on Twitter at waxpackguides. Thanks a lot.